Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Latter-day Lives podcast. My name's Sean Rapier, and again this week, so glad you decided to join us. You're going to be glad too, because my guest this week, Chantelle Squires, we have the director of the incredible new film Jane and Emma, and I had a chance to see it. Amazing. And Chantelle just blew me away. Getting to meet her was such a privilege. She is just an incredibly strong, talented, creative woman with such a powerful message. I'm just very excited for you to get to know her. And this week in my latter-day life, I'm going to tell you why I learned this week. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Latter-day Lives podcast. My name is Sean Rapier. I am your host. What an incredible interview this week. Chantelle Squires is the director of the new film Jane and Emma, and holy cow, she is so impressive. I just loved my conversation with her. I could have talked to her for hours. She just has an incredible point of view, and I think such an important voice. And I get the feeling we're going to be hearing a lot from her in the coming years. She's just incredible. And that's coming up, as well as this week in my latter-day life. I'll tell you why I really believe that if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, that it does still make a noise. It's all coming up. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's conversation. I had an amazing opportunity last week to see the most incredible film. It was, I'm going to call it life-changing, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But we have that film's director. Chantelle Squires is my guest. I'm thrilled to hear all about your life, Chantelle. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so excited to hear about this movie. But before that, let's get to a little bit about who you are. Tell us a little bit about where you're from.
I am originally from Lehi, Utah.
Big Lehi.
Big Lehi.
Which it is now. Now Lehi is like a big booming place.
Yeah, it was not when I was growing up. It was a small town.
Yeah.
I remember when we got our first stoplight. And we used to go walk across the street to the train tracks and put pennies on the train tracks and hide behind the bushes and then wait for the train to squash the pennies, and then we would go look for the pennies and leave once we felt the tracks vibrating. That was
the exciting thing in
Lehigh.
Lehigh.
That was the exciting thing.
But Lehigh also has an amazing film pedigree. What is Lehigh known for in the world of film?
Do you know, it's funny, I really didn't know about it till college, but...
What? How did you not know about this?
Because people were like,
did
you ever watch Footloose? And I was like, no, we just went to the train tracks and squashed pennies. That's all we did.
Yes, it is Footloose. Footloose was filmed... Was it filmed? It was filmed largely in Lehigh.
In Lehigh, the roller mills.
Dave Nibley was on our show, and Dave was actually an extra in it.
Oh, really?
We had a whole conversation about that.
Funny.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah, Lehigh roller mills and all that is right there. So
yeah, maybe one day I'll shoot
you
it
grew
from
up.
there.
You grew up a member of the church.
I did. Yeah, I was born and raised a member of the church.
Yeah.
I went to BYU, and now I live in Salt Lake.
That is a very, very Latter-day Saint story.
Yeah, well,
yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
Here we are.
I love it. And tell us a little bit about your family. You have siblings?
I do. I have an older sister named Robin and a younger brother named Christopher. And then I have a mom, Virginia, and my dad, Merlin. They're wonderful.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And your mom, where's your mom from?
She's from Peru, actually.
So cool. So you had lots of culture growing up.
I did. It was fun.
That is fantastic.
I would notice that my life was just a little different than my friends. I'd go to their house and I'd be like, our home is slightly different, which is great.
Cool.
My mom is just the sweetest.
That is so fantastic. So did you know when you were young that you wanted to be a filmmaker, or was this something that happened when you got older?
I didn't. I don't think I had any idea that I wanted to be a filmmaker, because it's just not in our family. We don't talk about that kind of stuff. My dad is really into the arts, and he would take us to symphonies, and we would listen to music. Music was a huge thing. I grew up very musical. We had a dance room in our home, and
dance room.
Yeah, because that's there was the living room and other people might call it the playroom, but we called it the dance room.
Yeah.
Because that's where we would have dance parties.
How fun. Family dance parties.
Family dance parties.
Oh, that is the coolest.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
My brother
so you grew up
was
surrounded by the arts.
Yeah, I did. And just appreciating it. So, yeah, we did. My brother, he's into the arts. He's a really talented singer and an actor. And so just kind of, it's in our blood a little bit.
It's in your DNA.
Yeah.
It's so awesome. I think that that's so important that we raise our kids at least appreciating it.
Yeah.
I don't know how much talent we all have for it, but
I'm grateful
so question is you're a director, and directors, require taking initiative and everything else. Do you think that being a middle child had anything to do with wanting that? I'm a middle child myself. Mm-hmm. And so I always kind of wonder if as middle children, well, I'm one of 4, so half of us were middle children. But, the oldest and the youngest kind of have a fixed role. Mm-hmm. I always see middle children like claiming their, sort of staking their claim, Mm-hmm. Do you think that had anything to do with you wanting to look for the arts or wanting to create your identity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of things for me that go into that because, yes, as a middle child, like I didn't have as much pressure as my sister did.
Right.
And then my brother, he was the only boy, and he had a different type of pressure, and I was just it didn't seem to matter as much what I was doing, and but I also had this drive to do. I was so busy. All growing up, I just was so engaged in so many things, and I still, if I have downtime, I just start to get antsy because I just feel like I should be doing something, and I really love creating, and so I had freedom in my life, and to be, and my parents were really, really great at telling me I could be whoever I wanted to be. And
love that. I love hearing that.
My dad was really supportive in that way. He just, he's a really incredible man and has always enabled and empowered me to make my own choices. And
awesome. He's
a brick mason, and I laid brick with him growing up for 2 solid summers. I was ripped, and I learned the value of having a good work ethic.
That's so cool.
And understanding why that's important. And my mom, coming from Peru, she's an immigrant, and she has this immigrant mentality. She worked her way through college. She taught herself English, and she gave me this motivation to just, make the most of your life. So I think from both sides, I just had I was really encouraged by my parents, and they were really supportive of anything I did, even if they don't quite understand it.
Yeah.
They've always been really supportive. But I think one thing too, along with that, that I've noticed, I was watching a documentary, and it was about female war correspondents.
Oh, wow.
And there was this one woman who was half Chinese, half American, and she's sitting in, I'm not sure where she was, in Iraq or something, and she has her flak jacket on, and she's doing journalism in the middle of a war zone, and someone kind of asked her how she found herself there, and she was like, when you're a mixed race, you don't really belong anywhere.
Interesting.
You don't feel white, and you don't feel, for my case, brown. I didn't feel very connected to my Spanish side, and I certainly didn't feel like I was white, and so I just didn't quite know where I belonged, and so that, I think, was a huge thing for me to just find my own place in the world.
Yeah, Stephen Jones is a very close friend of mine, and his father is black, his mother's white, and he talks about that, how he doesn't feel like he has 100% identity, but it's forced him to kind of create his own. Do you feel like there are some blessings in that, or is it all trial?
No, I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that you own that. That's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I think it probably opens up some doors for you. That's really cool. Do you remember when you first fell in love with the camera?
Well, I don't know if you can fall in love with a Hi8 camera.
I did. I had a Canon L2, the big white. Oh, that was such a beautiful camera. I didn't fall in love with the Hi8 process. For our listeners who don't know Hi8, it was a very small tape.
Long time ago.
a long time ago, but it was like the first high def format that there was.
Yeah.
Because before that, there was VHS and VHS-C and some really lousy stuff. But high 8 was like, wow, you can make it digital too.
Yeah. I loved filming, and I would just always film when I was in high school, just always film things. But I will say that my love for editing actually probably was my first love. So I would film things, but to sit down and put it together and cut everything together and create and put the music and just like finish the product, that happened for me when I was in high school.
Wow.
And it was my senior year, and it was my first all-nighter I spent. I was a cheerleader back in high school, and we went on a competition, and I was going to put together a film for our film festival that never actually happened because no one else in the school made a film. But I just edited the whole thing, and I was up all night, VCR plugged in, the radio plugged in, all of these things, and I loved it. And I remember I was doing a photo shoot for something later, and this woman who was the makeup artist, she said to me, or I was watching her work, and I'm like, how on earth did you know that this was what you wanted to do when you got older? Because I didn't know what I was going to do in college. Cool. And she was like, well, my advice to you is to figure out the thing that you love doing the most, and then try to figure out how to make money doing it. And I immediately went to that night that I pulled an all-nighter. I was like, I could do that every day.
You could edit all the time.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That is so cool. And you were doing analog editing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's full on, for kids who are listening, because you're very young, but so you must have gotten in right as that kind of crossover when it kind of switched over from analog to digital. It was a lengthy process.
Look younger than I am. I had some time with analog.
Did you really? See, you look very young.
I shot my first film on mini DV.
Did you
SD,
really?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're older than I thought you were, but you look very young.
Well, thank you.
But yeah, I mean, I remember because we used to, some of the stuff we used to shoot with our mutual friend Tyler, we'd shoot and then we'd have to upload it, and then we'd use a speed razor that it would take like, oh gosh, it was such a process. Mm-hmm. It was very laborious. And now I look at how easily we can shoot and edit things.
Yeah, I'm really glad I had that. I mean, I certainly don't have the experience of cutting film strips.
Right. Cutting film's a whole different thing.
A whole different beast. Yeah. But I feel like, taking the time and spending a lot of time with your footage and all of that, it gives you a different appreciation for things.
Yeah, to try to get everything exactly right. I mean, you were editing stuff that now iMovie that comes with a MacBook is like 10 times easier than what you were doing at the time.
iMovie is not that easy.
So, well,
it's a little simple.
At least you can get those exact cuts where you want them. Where I remember on tape trying to press pause sometimes and trying to stop it. I had a deck-to-deck Videonics setup that you had a little wheel that you used to, move back and forth. That was tough times. So did your friends all love that you shot in high school? Like, were they thrilled, or did they think, I don't know, why on earth was Chantelle shooting us?
I have no idea. Yeah. They no one really questioned it. I would just stand in the hall. I remember standing in the hall. Some people were like, look at the camera. I'm like, don't look at the camera. Just be natural.
You were a director. You were a true director by then. Don't look at the camera.
And then I just slip into school dances, and I'm like, I gotta film this. There's no we will forget what it was like to dance in the year 2000. I just thought it was so cool that it was the year 2000. So
that is awesome. So this all leads you to BYU. What did you study at BYU?
I studied film. It was the Theater and Media Arts program.
Yeah.
And I remember the very first day of school, I was sitting in the intro to film class with the professor, was Dean Duncan, and he was talking about film. I don't know, there was a couple hundred people in the class, and I just felt like there was a light shining down on me. It was just this is where I'm supposed to be.
This is your life.
Yeah, which I know that doesn't happen for everyone, sometimes takes
but it's so
a long
awesome
time.
That it does.
I was really grateful because I had that experience in high school editing and knowing my passion for that I immediately just jumped into being an editor. And so I, volunteered to work in the editing lab, and then I ended up getting a job there. And I as a student, edited a lot of stuff because there was a lot of student films and commercials and documentaries and different things that were coming through with the students. And so I just had a lot of really great opportunities. And it was my junior year that I was editing a documentary for some students who weren't film students. And so I had a lot of freedom. I needed to be the one to kind of create the story. And that's when I fell in love with documentaries.
Yeah.
And I started directing my first documentary in my senior year of college. And
what was that documentary?
It's called Reserved to Fight.
Reserved to Fight.
Yeah, it was the Iraq War had just started in 2003. Yeah. And 3 months after the war started, there was a whole unit of Marine reservists from Salt Lake City that had come home from the initial invasion. And I started to film them, and I ended up following 4 of them for about 4.5 years to see their readjustment home from war.
Wow.
So that was my first.
So if people want to see that, is there somewhere that they can see that that documentary?
It just finished its streaming contract with PBS because it was I got finishing funds from PBS.
Oh my gosh, how awesome.
Aired nationally and internationally for 5 years, and then so it's not streaming right now online, but I have, if you go on our website, reservedtofight.com.
Reservedtofight.com.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, man.
I mean, I know there are thousands of things, but what are some things that surprised you that you learned?
One of the things, there's a few things. From a storytelling perspective, I learned how difficult it is to tell an honest story. It takes a lot of work to really maintain integrity to someone's life. Yeah. As a storyteller, if I do an interview with you for 2 hours, right, and then I only use 2 minutes of it, I can make you look like a really awful person if I really wanted to.
Actually, you can make me look like a really awful person pretty easily. So I'm pretty easy that way. But I know what you mean. Yeah. It's hard to have the integrity.
Yeah. And for these men, there were 4 of them, I loved them so much, and they all were so different in their experience, their motivation for going to war, their ability to assimilate back into society. And so just trying to really understand a person, to their core, I really learned a lot. And I learned a lot about empathizing with people and trying to understand, not judging, realizing what people have gone through. And a lot of times I think that we really forget to think about that, and we just judge a person for what they've said and don't realize, hey, this is their backstory, you know? And so I think for me, I love making documentaries. It's so wonderful to do that, but it also helped me get to a place in my storytelling where I try to keep things focused on the human experience versus like a political agenda or say a message that I believe needs to get out there. It's for me, it's like, if I get to know you as a person and I get to learn to love you and care about you, and cry with you and feel for you, then I will be able to empathize with what it is that you have experienced. And for me, that's the best way to communicate something with people. So I think it was a really, really important time for me in terms of my storytelling.
So I'm a documentary junkie. I mean, that's 90% of what I watch is documentary. I read nonfiction and I watch documentaries because I find it so much more compelling. But sometimes I'll watch a documentary where halfway through I recognize a director's bias or a director's agenda, and it ruins it for me. I mean, it's really, really, it shuts me down. So the fact that you recognize that and look at the storytelling aspect of it is awesome. Was it hard to narrow 4 years with 4 people down to how long was the documentary?
Yeah, it was. Well, our PBS version ended up being 56 minutes.
Oh my gosh. So 4 years with 4 soldiers.
300 hours of footage. Yeah, we edited for a year. It was intense.
Oh my gosh. That must have been so frustrating at some times.
It was hard. It was a lot of work, but I mean, I just love making movies so much. So the process was really cool. And kind of to what you were saying, I was doing a test screening, as we were in the editing process, and it was like people at the end of it would, have all these opinions about the war, which I don't think people should not have opinions, but I didn't want that to be the focus because like you said, like you could eliminate audience members if there's too much. But over time, like we just finessed the story to the point where the last screening I had, all the questions were, how's Mark? How's Chris?
Oh, that's great.
How's Earl? How's Matt? And I was like, the film is done.
That's awesome.
So yeah, but it's a lot. It's hard, but it's worth it.
Some of my favorite documentaries are about subjects I could not possibly care less about, but I care about the people.
Yeah.
And so if you've told that story that way, I can watch documentaries. My wife kind of laughs at me because I'll be watching. What are you watching? Why are you watching that? But if the people or the story is compelling, I can get wrapped up. Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite, not your own, but do you have a favorite documentary? Do you have one that you kind of always go back to mentally?
Oh my gosh.
Or a few?
That is a really good question. I cannot remember the name of this documentary, but it was about this guy who was a tour guide in New York. It's in black and white. It's an older film. I can't remember it.
Was that an Errol Morris film?
Oh, this is where you get me.
That's okay.
These. I don't remember what, but
I think I saw that.
Been.
Yeah, I think I saw that one. And he's an older tour guide, and he's like talking about how the glory days used to be. Yeah, I think I saw that one.
He was just like
characters.
I love a character.
Yeah,
where you just like, man, that guy's so great, and he's just a beautiful human being.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I've seen that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get wrapped up in it because when you find a truly great character in a documentary, it is so far beyond what someone can write. Mm-hmm. I mean, and we're going to talk about now making a historical film in a few minutes, where you're dealing with true characters as well. But that's just awesome. So question for you, this has come up with a few of our directors that we've interviewed, and they have very strong opinions, so I'll be interested to hear what you think. We've had directors who have said film school is the best, and if you want to get into film, go to film school. Mm-hmm. It's the greatest thing in the world. I've had 2 other directors who have very forcefully said, do not go to film school. Go work on, volunteer or be a grip or whatever, learn film on set. Go to business school, go to marketing, go into something else that you can apply to film. Mm-hmm. Where do you fall in all of it now, having gone through BYU Film?
Well, I have found a lot of success through all of my experiences, so I would never say, no, that was the wrong way to go.
Okay.
Right? So I think that no matter what it is, if it's school or if it's work, you have to make the most of the opportunity. Yeah. 100%. If you are not self-motivated, you will not work in film.
Right.
Film does not hand you anything. So it doesn't matter if you're in film school or not. Like, for me, the thing that was so great about BYU is, at least when I was there, I don't know how it is now, but there was a lot of access to equipment and resources.
Oh, yeah.
And there was also a lot of graduates of BYU that would, come back. And I created my own opportunities. If there was an opportunity, one of the first colleagues that I met was when I was 17 years old. And I was a freshman in college. And it was Sterling Van Wagenen. He is an amazing director, producer.
Wow, I don't think I know him.
The co-founder of the Sundance Film Festival.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
He directed 2 of the Work in the Glory movies. So
wow.
he's just incredibly talented. And there was an opportunity through BYU. They said, hey, there's a director's party happening at Sundance, and this alumni this filmmaker needs some people to hand out swag bags. And I went up with my friend. We were the only two who volunteered to do it. And I was like, what is this opportunity? Nobody is taking it.
That's crazy.
So we went and we did it. We went online. We just handed out bags. I had no idea who any of these cool people were. And I didn't, give my card to any. I mean, it wasn't like that. I just was enjoying the experience. But at the end of the night, he's such a wonderful person. And he came up to me. He was like, here's my business card. If you ever need anything, feel free to call. And he was working in Florida as the dean of a film department out there. And so a year later, I pull out his card and I was like, I need an internship and I want it to be in Florida. So I called him and I said, hey, I'm going to be in Florida this summer. Would it be possible for me to get an internship through your school?
Wow, good for you.
He was like, yeah. So a week later, he calls me and he's like, I have an internship at Universal Studios. It's a really highly sought after internship. So let me know right now if you can't do it, but it starts in a week and a half. And I was like, I'll be there. And so I called my uncle who lived in Florida. I was like, hey, can I come live with you this summer? Of course, I did. And that was the beginning of, it's just networking.
Yeah.
Really, it's networking. That experience came through the forum I was at BYU. And then through my experience at Universal Studios, I met someone who knew someone else in Utah. And I made sure that I connected there. And every opportunity that I've had is really my strong desire to network. I think so. That's why it's no matter where you are,
awesome. You
have to do that.
Yeah, you got to take advantage of those things.
You got to see the opportunities and take them.
How was your Florida experience?
It was awesome.
Yeah.
I worked on a 3D Sesame Street movie. So
a 3D Sesame Street movie
for a Universal Studios ride in Japan.
How cool!
So yeah, it was really fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was. It taught me a lot about a lot of things. It was a very interesting experience because I was an intern there, and I watched how set ran, and I actually had this experience where I was on set helping out, and I was asked to watch a light, and because it was a hot set, meaning everyone was going to come back if the light moved, they'd have to start over. And so I was asked to watch the light, so I did, and I was, working as the PA, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, and everybody came back, and everyone was working, and someone asked me to come and watch the camera, and I was like, I can't do it. I've got to watch this light. And he was like, oh, they're just messing with you. Come down and watch the camera. I was like, no, I have to watch the light. And he grabbed my arm and pulled me down, and immediately the second AD, the one that was over me, he just started yelling at me and kicked me off set. And it was really crazy. It was really hard.
Oh my gosh.
And it was funny. Since we have a Latter-day Saint audience, I'll tell you this little tidbit. I was walking away. I mean, I was mad. I was like, this is the most unfair thing. And the primary song popped into my head. As I have loved you, love one another. By this shall men know ye are my disciples. And I was like, dang it.
I don't want to love this guy.
So mad. But I did. I actually did. And I'm really glad because it ended up being a really good thing for me. But I learned a lot about filmmaking and also about the fact that I was one of the only women on set. But it was interesting because people were saying, well, if you want him to be nicer to you, you're going to need to, sleep with him. And I was like, that was my first experience with that. And I'm like, you know what? Never, ever will I ever go down that path or try to get something that is not with my skill and talent. And I was just appalled that was how things ran. And so it was really motivating for me. It was and
that's
huge
the darker
motivator.
side of filmmaking that unfortunately I've heard more stories like that than we care to. I think now it's a very positive thing that is coming to light.
Yeah.
Once you shed a light on something dark, then it goes away.
Yeah.
Hopefully. But that still happens.
Yeah.
So did you end up getting to go back on set, or was that the end of it?
Well, the great thing was I was still friends with the director and all the producers, and their editor was in LA. They were in Florida, so they just didn't have an edit. It wasn't, and I'm like, well, I'll edit it for you. So
you keep creating your own opportunities.
Yeah, and I edited the whole thing, and I was going into a meeting, and it was with all the directors, producer, and this guy that had kicked me off set. He's like, well, why does she get to go there? And I'm like, because she edited it for us. And it was almost like a full circle. Like, see, this is how you do it.
That's how you make it
happen.
This
is how you make it happen. And
so awesome.
So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was good.
So then what was what would you consider your directorial debut? I guess you had your documentary. That was really your directorial debut.
Yeah.
What was the first non-documentary that you directed?
Well, really, it's Jane and Emma.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I've done some music videos, but those are fun.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, that we have a lot of mutual friends.
Yeah.
And you've done some stuff for some Latter-day Saint artists?
Yeah.
Like Nick Day?
Yeah. Hillary Weeks, and Nathan Pacheco.
Wow, cool stuff.
Callie Reed.
What do you love about directing music videos?
Oh, they're so fun.
Yeah.
I love music. Like I said, growing up, we were very musical. Yeah. I was in a bluegrass band at one point in my life.
Were you a singer?
I played the banjo and I sang. Not very many people saw us, and that's okay. It was fun. I loved it. So,
that's
just
great.
kind of, I know enough about music to be a pain in the butt sometimes, because I have enough opinions about it. But also just to be able to, to tell a story with music. I love it. So those have been really great, really, really good opportunities. And those happened right at the time that I was like working on developing Jane and Emma. But really, Jane and Emma is my first.
That is amazing to me, because Jane and Emma is so good. So we're going to dive in. I've been kind of holding it back, dying to talk about Jane and Emma. And this is the film I alluded to at the beginning. Jane and Emma, which, by the way, from the time that this podcast is premiering, Jane and Emma is opening this weekend. Mm-hmm. So I got to see a little bit of a sneak preview, which was really awesome. Mm-hmm. And tell us how this whole project got started. How did Jane and Emma come to be? Well,
and I'll tell you like the deep stuff for me too.
Please.
Because I had been doing my documentaries. I had a company. We did it for about 10 years. And at the end, I worked with Arthur Van Wagenen, who now works with Excel Entertainment and Deseret Book. He was my business partner. And we ended up splitting off, and he went and worked there. And I had my second baby, so I have 2 children.
Oh, awesome.
And then I was dealing with life, and I ended up getting divorced. And so
rough time.
It was hard,
for
sure.
That's not an easy one.
No, and it really. I was talking to someone recently, and they said it's amazing what kind of beautiful things can come from a divorce.
Yeah.
And it's that whole like you're going through what I call like the tunnel of thorns, where anywhere you go, you feel like you're going to bleed, and the only way out is for the Savior to carry you out of it. And having that experience for me, like it just changed everything for me. And so when I jumped back into film, like after my divorce, I called Arthur up and I was like, hey, can we go to lunch? Because I hadn't worked for 3 years in film, and I didn't know if I would ever get back into it. And but I needed to put food on the table for my children. I mean, that was really the motivating thing. I was like, I need to start working again. And we had this really great conversation about the stories that people need to be telling right now, and the stories that people need to be hearing right now. And I think because I just had so much, and I had just learned so much about my own beliefs, about God, about my relationship with the Savior, things that like, I think prior to that experience, you have this box, and like you move along, and A plus B equals C, and life is, like we all try so hard, and to have all of that just like shatter and have to like make sense of it again. I just had so much inside of me to tell. I I didn't know exactly how to do that. But one of the things he said, he was like, I think we need to be making a film by women, for women, about women.
Great.
And he was like, you know, would you like, do you feel like you would want to direct something? And I thought about it, and because I had edited other feature films prior to doing documentaries. And I was like, I remember when I was editing the films, I would be like, oh man, I need this. I need, you know, these pieces. If only I had been on set and I could have gotten the things that I need to make this scene work better. So all of that came to me and I was like, yeah, actually, I think I'd be really good at directing something. And I was like, in fact, I have to do it, you know, like, because I have so much inside of me.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that God gives us those things just for us, you know?
No.
I really believe that, like, my experiences that I've received, they come to me in a way that's so intense. Like, I live kind of on a heightened intensity. I don't know why. I think I'm just like a really passionate person. And so when stuff happens to me, I formalize it in my head in this very poetic way. And so I visually see things. And so all of those experiences and everything I learned, I don't know, it's just like all these stories and all of these things, like, just wanting to come out. And so that was really what started the whole process, and just my desire to make a film. And we started looking for stories to tell, and you know, one of our first thoughts was, let's make something about polygamy. I mean, really, like, I tackling difficult topics.
Yeah.
You know, like, being able to do that. And we eventually turned, said, let's talk about race. And we were talking with some people that he works with, and they were like, let's, you know, what about Jane Manning James? And so then...
Were you familiar with that story before?
No, I wasn't.
I was not at all either. Mm-mm. You know that? I feel terrible. Like, I felt terrible. Like, as I'm watching it, my first thought was, how did I not know this story?
Yeah.
Tell us, but let's take one step back and let's tell our listeners who Jane, when we say Jane and Emma, who are Jane and Emma?
Yeah, so it's Jane Manning James, and she was one of the first African American members of the church. She lived with Emma Smith, so it's Emma Smith in the film. And Joseph, she lived with them in the mansion home and worked in the mansion house in 1844. Yeah. And she lived with them for 9 months, I think it was, before Joseph was killed.
And even before she got there, she was a free woman. Her family were free.
She was born free.
But this was in the time of intense racism.
Yes.
And so she lived with them, and you tell their story in such an amazing way. You're going to hear me fanboy like crazy about this film. I can be critical of film, and I'm not on this one. Everything about it is amazing. It's a fantastic film. We'll talk a little bit about where it's going to be playing. Go see it. Go see this movie. I've already told about 30 different people I know to go see this movie, because it will change your life, and it'll change the way you understand Emma and the way you look at race and polygamy and all kinds of issues, because you tackle a little bit of everything in it. And it's so phenomenal. But in any case, so how did it come to be that this was the story that you chose then? Yeah,
so one of the people that we went to talk to was Temu Smith and Xandra Vrains.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe people are familiar with them.
The Sisters in Zion?
Mm-hmm, yeah. And
who are so funny, and so I follow them. I don't know them. I've never met them. I follow them on social media, and they are so fantastic.
Yeah, and they spent a lot of time in their life as African American Mormon or members of the Church
Latter-day,
of Jesus
we're all getting used to it. We're all getting used to it.
They really, Jane was an icon for them, and someone that they loved. And so Arthur asked Temu, like, if you were to do this, what would the story be? And she said, well, it's got to be about Jane and Emma and their friendship. And so we have an amazing writer, Melissa Leilani Larson. Yeah. And she and I had gone to school together. We'd worked together. I'd read some of her work where she's able to, it's it's magical to me because you read a script that could potentially be really controversial.
Yeah.
And somehow she just is able to like do it in a very like objective way that's like just filled with love all over. So all of a sudden you're just thinking about like, you know, and it's not one side or the other. Like she's really good. So she was on board.
It's all true what you're saying.
Yeah.
Having seen the movie, I'll just tell you, it's so true what you're saying. Because I think some of our listeners might be thinking, oh, well, if you're touching on all these things, I don't know if it's a movie for me. It is. Trust me on this. Go see it. Because you do. You have a very light touch on all of these things. And it's very human. Going back to what we talked about character driven. It's very human and very touching. Yeah. And not controversial. There's nothing in it that I found remotely controversial.
Yeah.
You know, that... Anyway, I keep interrupting you. Go on.
No. Well, and I think that's because it's true, right?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes we're afraid of the truth. I'm just going to say that right now. I really believe that. Afraid of our own truths, you know? Mm. And I think that's one of the things that I learned in my own, like, trial of faith in my life is that it's like, well, this is my truth. And if I'm afraid of that, and I can't talk about that, and I can't let this be okay, and I can't, and I can't let this be my life, and love it, then like, what is my life going to look like? And I think that if we cannot talk about Jane's trials and Emma's trials and their reality truthfully, then how can we be honest with ourselves? Mm. And I do think that that's actually a really big struggle for members of the church. I've found that in church, you know, sometimes I would just be freely talking about my trial and my journey and my doubts, or my, you know, like when I was having doubts, this is where Christ came in, and like people would come to me after Sunday school. Thank you so much for sharing that. Like, I can't like talk about those kinds of things. And I'm like, we have to. We have to talk about those things, because life is like, we're supposed to contribute to the world and bring light. But if we're just like hiding in ourselves and not able to like be free with who we are and love ourselves for who we are, then we can't take our blinders off and we can't see everyone else around us that is struggling. And I think that that's one of the things with this film is that, like, you know, we have our trials. Jane and Emma both have their things that they're dealing with. And in this film, you really see them realize that they're not looking at what someone else is hurting from. And they're not realizing that, oh, if I'm honest with myself, then I would notice that this wonderful, beautiful woman inside and out is going through the exact same thing. Yeah. And we can be there for each other. And God has given us to each other to be able to be stronger and get through this really hard life. Yeah.
Well, and that's what's amazing. You touch on so many facets in the film of how they are there for each other, but then they have issues with each other. Mm-hmm. They have issues externally. They have issues with how they perceive each other. I mean, it's just so beautifully told, but in the end, it's so faith affirming too. One of the things that I love about it is, now getting to know you, I see your trials in divorce in the film. I see your trials I see your background with race in the film. I see you as a woman in the film. There are not a lot of directors that could have told the story the way you did. I'll tell you that in the most wonderful, positive way. You come through that film in a lot of ways. I think it's so... One of the things I'm excited about is taking my daughters to see it. Mm. Because there have not been... I mean, my sons, I've got 100 different films that I can show them and 100 different stories. Why do you think it's so important for us to tell the stories of strong Latter-day Saint women?
Oh my gosh. We have all day, right?
Just a simple little question, right?
Oh, I love being a woman. Yeah. I do. And I as a woman, especially in the film industry where I will often be the only woman sitting at the table.
Yeah.
A lot. This is like a really big thing, you know, and
right.
I think there's like 4% of directors are women.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm going to totally butcher this, but maybe like 9% are writers of writers, or maybe like 18. I don't know, but it's like really just a small percentage of the storytellers that are out there
right.
are women. And I know what it's like to be a woman because I've lived that. You know, when I was pregnant with my son, I was kind of freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what it's like to be a boy. How am I going to raise this son? Like, I could do a girl because there's so much that you know because you lived it. I've lived it every single day of my life. I know how I feel. I know how I understand. I understand myself. Sometimes I don't even understand, right? Like, we're always trying to figure out who we are and understand, like, how God loves us as his daughters. So everything that I've ever experienced has given me the knowledge to tell a story about being a woman. And my whole team, most all my team were female. And when I was working with my writer, she knows so much about me because we would be talking about a scene and then like a personal anecdote would pop into my head. So I would be like, okay, well, I think I should tell you this story. So I would just like, you know, talk about an experience I had and talk about how I felt, right? Because I feel like if you can infuse actual human truths into the story, people will resonate, whether you're a man or woman. If it's a truth, then people will be able to connect to it. And so, I mean, I share so much about myself with her. And of course, she brings to the table, and our other producers bring to the table their experiences as well. But I just think that's the only way that we could have told this story. Because, you know, it's a relationship between two women. Yeah. And if a woman is getting mad at another woman, the way she responds has to be authentic and accurate. And I've watched other films where I don't connect to the women, and I'm like, yeah, no way. Like, that is not what a woman's going to do in that situation. No woman's going to act like that. I mean, maybe someone does, but I don't know her. Yeah. And I do know a lot of women, and I think it's so important. And I had this experience while I was making Jane and Emma, and you might laugh. It's fine, but like I was watching Wonder Woman. It was in the theaters. Yeah. And I remember sitting there, and like, I'm not going to say I look like her, but she had dark hair. You know, her skin wasn't perfectly white, right? She's this, and she was a superhero. And I've never seen a lead in a film that I actually felt connected to. Right. It was the first time I'd had that experience. Yeah. And this was a couple of years ago, right? Or a year, right. And I was just like blown away. Yeah. And I asked some of my friends, my male friends, I was like, have you ever watched a superhero movie where you've actually like thought you could be that superhero? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've never had that experience until this time in my life, because there were so many things that were so real to being a woman
that you could connect through.
She's like, I'm going to go save the world. And oh my gosh, it's a baby, you know? And it's like, yeah, that's what we do, because we have all of these different feelings inside of us. And it was so refreshing to see a real woman that I could connect to. Yeah. And so honestly, like, one of the things people ask me, like, what do you hope people get from this film? And one of the things I really hope is that I hope young girls, young women, women, older women watch this film and have a desire to make movies. I mean, I know that like that may be a lot to ask, but we need more films. We need more stories about women told from the perspective of a woman, because I don't know exactly what percentage of women there are on the earth, but I'm guessing half.
I'm guessing it's probably somewhere in the 50% range, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's got to be.
I don't know. Maybe there's more. I don't know. But like, that's a lot of people that we know our whole life. And I would say even like within the church, like, we listen to men's voices all the time, and we have to take that and relate to it. Yeah. And it is a little bit more work, and it doesn't always connect in such a deep way as when you sit and talk, like if you go to Relief Society.
Sure.
You know, like that can be.
I can literally only imagine.
Well, sometimes it just is so fulfilling.
Right.
You know, to be able to like be with women and sisters who understand and who can get really deep. I have also very deep relationships with a lot of men.
Sure.
So, you know, but I'm saying this.
But you connect differently with women. Women connect differently with each other.
Yeah.
And I would say that we need more women to make movies. We need more women to do stand-up comedy, to write, to speak, to, you know, whatever it is in the arts and in sport and in all types of things. I mean, I've got daughters who need more role models.
Yeah.
And I think it's a wonderful time in the church to see the church as a body acknowledging that. I think this film, I mean, it's a story about two women. It's one of the things I was talking to my wife about it afterward. I was saying it's such an amazing film, and it dawned on me later, wow, Joseph Smith, the great prophet, is a minor character in it. Mm-hmm. Like, how cool is it? Like, how cool is it that here these two amazing, beautiful women were front and center? Tell us a little bit about the actresses who play Jane and Emma.
Yeah, Jane was played by Danielle Deadweiler. She lives in Atlanta. She's phenomenal.
Incredible.
And I'll get into her. The other actress, Emily Goss, plays Emma Smith, and she's out of LA. When we were doing the casting calls, it was really interesting. We had about 26 audition tapes for Joseph because it was pilot season and there were just 26 men who auditioned for the role. We had about double auditioned for the role of Emma.
Wow.
And so maybe like 50. And then for Jane, we had 1,200 reply back.
1,200?
1,200. And then we had 300 audition tapes come back.
Wow.
And I mean, that is, you know, it's a little sad that there's just not that many roles for an African-American woman in that age range. But I was also like really hoping that that's what would happen because I was like, I know we can get someone who's amazing and who should never be able to do this small budget film, but we are going to find someone incredible.
She was phenomenal.
She was
incredible. So and they are not members of the church?
No, they're not.
So did you get any sense of their reaction to the story itself?
You know, they're so professional.
Yeah.
And they're so experienced. And they, like, immediately, when I had my first conversations with them, they had, you know, obviously read the script and really wanted to do the role because of who the person was in the film.
Right.
You know, Jane, like you were saying, it's during the time of slavery.
Yeah.
And a lot of films are made about slaves. And Jane is not one.
No.
She's this incredibly strong, like, pillar of strength and really a strength for the whole church. I think as members start to watch it, will understand that and see, like, oh, there was a lot of really important things going on at the beginning of the church, and she was a big part of it. And so to have that be the role that you get to play, like, you know, she
role of a lifetime.
Yeah, she owned it from the first second. And I remember I did when I was doing the callback with her on Skype.
Yeah.
She was there's a scene where she's talking about how the family walked 800 miles to get to Nauvoo. And I had her do that scene because I was like, I really want to see, you know, what she does with that. And I have on my iPad, was taking notes. I have it written, if she is Jane, people will love her.
Yeah.
And I knew it because I was like, oh my gosh. She walked 800 miles just to be with the saints, and I love her so much.
And I know the scene you're talking about, and I'm excited to see it again. There's nothing in it, you know, objectionable at all. Rated PG film. It is. We're going to take our whole family. You should take your whole family and go. It's just an amazing film. If people want to see it, where can they see the film?
They, on opening weekend, which is this weekend.
October
12th, 13th, 14th. It's open in Utah only. So it's in Megaplex and some Cinemark theaters. And you can look on Fandango and just type in Jane and Emma and see where it is and buy your tickets, because this is the thing that's kind of crazy about it, is that if it doesn't get like sold out on opening weekend in Utah, then it likely won't go anywhere else but Utah. And it's so crazy. Like, you kind of dream like, okay, I would like to have a release here and here and here, but it's like, well, it's a small budget movie and it's got a small budget marketing. And so it's like, this is the only way. But if people see it, then other theaters in other cities will say, oh, we want to have that play in our city.
Yeah.
And lots of people are reaching out like, hey, we'd love to have a screening out here. And I'm just like, well, then tell your friends in Utah.
Tell your friends in Utah they have to see it.
They have to go see it.
Go see it this weekend. And if you are thinking about, you have friends or family members who are not members of the church, this is not a church movie. This is a relationship movie about people who happen to be members of the church. And there's certainly, the church is woven all the way through it. But this is not a movie like if you're thinking, oh, I don't want to invite this person because they're not a member of the church or they're not active or whatever. No, this is a movie for everyone, and it is a movie for everyone to see. Take your family, go see this movie. Take friends. We will be there this weekend. But yeah, you have to support it. I mean, because in order for more of these types of things to be made, and what I love about it is just a great film. Forget everything else. Forget the spiritual messages. Forget everything else. To my listeners, please go see this movie and support it, because it is absolutely awesome. And it's been so fantastic getting to know you. I appreciate it. I'm going to ask you, we'll finish up with the question that we ask all of our guests. Mm-hmm. When you say, do we have all day? This is a simple little question. What does being a member of the church mean to you?
Oh, yeah, that is a good question.
Not a small one.
No. I really love Jesus Christ. I love the Savior a lot. And I know that he loves me. And I will say too, through my experiences, I know how much he loves women. And of course, I'm sure he loves men, but I know he loves men. I've, as a woman, have felt his love for his daughters. And I feel like I've been given a lot of gifts, and I need to use those gifts for good.
Yeah. And
to help, I guess, build the kingdom, right? Like, that's what we're supposed to be doing. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm honestly all the time trying to be a disciple of Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father, because I feel like that's what this life is for, is to figure out how to become more like God. And that's what all of our trials are for. And so while they're difficult and really hard, and sometimes you think, why is this happening? Why does this have to happen? I feel like God trusts us with our trials so that we can become worthy to be with him again, which is ultimately what I want and what I know a lot of people want. And so to be in this church and to be able to know that and to be able to be on that journey, it's what life is made of. And I'm really grateful for all of those experiences.
The film is Jane and Emma. It is opening this weekend. Go see this movie. We have a director, creator, artist, mother, and true daughter of God, Chantelle Squires. Thank you for sharing your Latter-day Life with us.
Thank you so much.
My thanks to Chantelle. She was just amazing. I love that we have really powerful, strong role models for our young women and for all of us. I mean, forget about just for women. I was so impressed by her. And this film, can I just say it again? Please go see this movie. If you live in Utah, please go see the film, especially this weekend. Like Chantelle was explaining, the way it works with independent film is that if a lot of people go see it here in Utah, then people in Arizona or California or places where there are larger Latter-day Saint communities, they'll start saying, okay, maybe people will see it here too. So please support this movie. You will not regret it. It's a fantastic film. This week in my Latter-day Life, of course, what's on my mind? General Conference. It is awesome. And this General Conference was very different for me from any other one. When I go back and I look at my life, growing up, of course, I watched Conference every 6 months with my family, like we all do. And then I went on a mission. So I watched them all with my parents, siblings. Then I went on a mission. And we got the recorded version. We didn't see it live, but usually I saw it recorded. I saw it with companions. And then when I got home, I had roommates, and I watched with roommates. And then I got married. I had my permanent roommate, my wife. And ever since then, I've watched with her, then our children, on and on. And I realized this weekend, I have never watched Conference alone. Now, how did I realize that? Well, that's because this weekend, that all changed. I had a very busy weekend lined up. In addition to Conference, I had some interviews and some other things I needed to get done. My in-laws went up to a lake to hang out for the weekend. And my wife, they invited her, and I encouraged her to go. So she went with our children. And I was left here alone to watch Conference. And in the Saturday afternoon session, as they were asking us to sustain the prophet and all the apostles and all of the authorities, I found myself sitting there by myself, raising my hand. And it was an incredibly spiritual moment for me. There's the old saying that if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a noise? I would say that there I was sitting there by myself. There was no one around me. First time in my life that I can ever remember that I was by myself, sitting in my living room, and raising my hand that, yes, I sustain the prophet. Yes, I sustain the Quorum of the 12 and my local authorities. And I thought all the way down to my bishop, my elders quorum president, all these people, that I sustain them. And I thought, well, all that matters is that God sees and that I see. And I have a chance to speak and to be heard. And even if there was no one else around, that my arm being raised to sustain this man really mattered. It mattered to me, and it mattered to God. And what a blessing. And it got me thinking down the path of how many other things do I do when I'm by myself? Is it all appropriate? The media that I consume, everything else? Or do I have two standards? Because it was nice to have one standard, even with nobody else around. And it got me to thinking that maybe I should look at other aspects of my life and make sure that they're aligned, even when I'm by myself. But what a blessing it was. And yet, I don't know that I ever want to do it again. I love having my family around for Conference, and grateful for them. And that's what's happening this week in my Latter-day Life. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, my last plug, please go see Jane and Emma. You will not regret it. And for those of you, especially you sisters on a social media fast, if you want to watch the interview with Chantelle, not only will I have it on Facebook, but I'll have it on YouTube. So you can go to YouTube. If you don't want to go to Facebook during the 10-day media fast, please go to YouTube and check it out. So until next week, when we have another fantastic show for you, please remember, as always, that there is a great, big, beautiful world out there. So go be in it, just not of it. Thanks for listening.